So if you're confused about what like devoted mods are, haunted modifiers are, what about the corpses, how do I make currency from Necropolis, you are definitely not alone. This mechanic is pretty complicated and has needed some massive buffs in recent time, but where it stands now is a very profitable mechanic that has a extremely powerful crafting system. But I know a lot of people don't like interacting with super difficult systems, and they just want a simple strategy where they can go in, know what exactly they need to do, and they don't need to do anything complicated. Just run some maps and get some stuff done. That's what I'm going to talk about in this video. Now, there is one notable change, and I had to completely re-record, completely re-edit this video this morning. I made this last night, it was already ready to go, and they put this hotfix out at 1:30 a.m. So there's a strategy that you could use with frogs and rats when it came to divine orbs dropping that was essentially breaking the economy. They were filtering through hundreds of white tier maps trying to find this chance to drop a divine orb and doing a whole bunch of crazy shenanigans to make a ridiculous amount of divine orbs drop. That has been heavily nerfed now, so I'm gonna have to adjust the strategies, which I've already done a little bit. We'll still talk about those, they're just not as broken as they once were. So what we're going to cover in this video is going to be the devoted haunted modifiers, how you should be scaling both of these, and why haunted modifiers are a little bit more important than you think, some of the different devoted modifiers that are worth your time, as well as some of the haunted modifiers that you should be avoiding, atlas points and things on the tree that is going to make farming in this mechanic a lot more powerful, which embers to use and when, as well as what to do with your corpses if and when you do find them. Now, if you enjoy these kinds of videos or this video does end up helping you out, make sure to give this video a like, and if you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell to stay up to date with all the latest videos. And without further ado, let's talk about the Necropolis League mechanic. Now, I've heard a decent amount of you have said that you really do like the notes and you would like them to be somewhere for you. I have decided to put these on the very lowest Patreon tier, so going forward, these notes will be available there. And they will be coming out simultaneously with the video so that there's no pay to get information early on some kind of strategy. I tend to avoid strategies that can either be nerfed or strategies that get very less worthwhile because of making a video about it these days. You'll see a lot of other YouTubers do videos where they make crazy, insane strategies after they've already profited from them, and then they make them public, they explode, and then they no longer work. I kind of avoid those videos. So let's talk about devoted and haunted modifiers. So if you don't know what these are, if you haven't understood it yet, devoted modifiers are these yellow positive modifiers that you might see in the game. So these devoted modifiers, if we go into game here and we look at this map I've got, these devoted modifiers are these positive yellow ones up at the top. These are the modifiers that most people are focusing on, and while they are important, it's not everything having to do with this. There are also these haunted modifiers down here, which are going to be negative modifiers. But as you might see, it does increase the chance to find corpses and all flame embers. So realistically, every single map is not going to have worthwhile devoted modifiers that you care about. Some will, and you can focus on those when they do happen. Like, you should probably still, to this day, if you get one of those cool modifiers that says, hey, percentage chance to drop a divine orb, you should probably toss a frog or a rat on that regardless, just so you can get some more loot. However, most of the time you're going to get things like this, where it's like chance to drop an additional orb of fusing, that's okay, but it's not insane. And then like chance for a pack to be upgraded to rare. Here, you probably want to focus more on getting more corpses and more all flame embers, meaning you'd like be moving these ones that are very impactful. Like, movement speed is not going to make pale blackguards very much more dangerous, and this has the highest density, so you're going to be getting the most corpses and all flame embers from putting it here. Now, talking a little bit about the Lantern of Aramor and the window here, there's a lot of effects and a lot of things going on here that you may not be aware of. One is there's going to be these green and red modifiers that are going to be on the left. You'll notice that they can both increase and reduce the tier of these haunted or devoted modifiers, as well as increase or reduce the pack size of the enemies within. These are important, and they are more impactful a lot of the time than anything else here. Because, for example, even if something is in one of the very highest slots, if it has 50% less pack size, putting a percentage drop devoted modifier on it is probably not that great. And at the same time, these plus the modifier tiers aren't always good on devoted modifiers. Devoted modifiers a lot of the time are pretty bad. So if there is something where you don't have any good devoted modifiers, but you do have some good haunted modifiers, you could put them here, but we would lose pack size, of course, so this isn't worth it, and it'll increase the amount of corpses and all flame embers that you have access to. So this is the kind of thing that you should be thinking about. Next thing is that each pack on the left is actually ordered in general from highest density at the top to lowest density at the bottom. What this means is that you'll notice the pack size of the monsters is just kind of random, right? It depends on the pack themselves. This can be modified with all flame embers as well. However, you'll notice that line in the second tier that says pack density high. What this means is that if the pack density is high, that means that most of the enemies in the zone that you're entering are going to be of this type. And if you do use something from the Lantern of Aramor, one of these embers, say if we drop this on here, the pack density stays consistent with what was already in that slot. For example, you'll notice the pack density is high here on these two Kahama warriors. Or if I take the same exact ember and put it down here, the pack density is very low. So it's important when you're using the embers of the All Flame that you put them on the high density packs if that's what you're looking to get. So that's most of what you need to know about the Lantern of Aramor and the basics of the window itself. Now let's talk a little bit about these devoted modifiers, because this is going to be half of what is important on moving these mods around. Now, when it comes to devoted modifiers, there are a few that are going to be significantly better than other ones. Most of those are going to be things like the Nameless Seer. What this is that if you do get a Nameless Seer in your zone, you have to kill all the enemies of that type, and then the Nameless Seer will spawn, and he will give you access to, most of the time, one very high tier unique. Do be aware that not all high tier uniques are good, so like there are tier 0 uniques like Mageblood and Headhunter, but there's also like 6 other tier 0 uniques that are worth like 3 chaos. Most of the time he gives you like a tier 2, tier 1 at the very least, but just be aware it's not like a you get a free Headhunter or Mageblood kind of mod. It's just a chance at something good. You always want to take it. It is very powerful, but it's not guaranteed. Next thing is going to be Corrupting Tempest. The only reason I mention this one is because this might help some people who really don't like trading for currency. Corrupting Tempest, if you do interact with it, will give you a lot of 6 links, which means that you're going to get a lot of fusings. It'll also give you access to some like corrupted tier jewels and things like that. But it's notable because it is pretty decent. It's an older mechanic that people may not realize how it works, but it spawns these Corrupting Tempests. You need to stand in them. It'll give you a buff, and then you go kill enemies with that buff. All of the items they drop are corrupted. Now, let's talk about the big one. Percentage chance to drop Chaos, Divine, Annulments, Exalted Orbs, that kind of thing. Now, this is still very powerful when you combine it with all of the proper things. So if we look here in game, and we take a look at our list, you'll see that it says when it's combined with the green modifiers on the left that increase pack size, and you put frogs and rats and embers on it. So the idea would be is that the ideal circumstance is that you get chance to drop Divine Orbs, Exalted Orbs, Annulment Orbs, and then you have plus the modifier tier and plus the pack size. You move that Divine Orb modifier into here. Hopefully it's going to be on something that's high density, and then you'll go ahead, you'll find your rats, I think is what I have access to, but unfortunately the difference is too high, so I can't put it on there. But you take these, you apply it to that, and then you just get a bunch of items, right? You get a bunch of divines, a bunch of exalts, a bunch of annulments, whatever the item is. Now this has been heavily nerfed. It's not as common as it once was, but you should still be aware of what to do when it happens. Do I think that you should change your entire Atlas strategy around this like people were so that you can get the most out of it? No, not anymore. You should just be aware that you should just focus on doing those few things that are very important and having them available if it ever does pop up. Next thing is going to be like increased pack size or quantity. This can be really strong with just kind of your generic embers that you have, like pack monsters drop X, tattoos, things like that. You're just going to apply those to them. The last one is going to be convert X items into divines, into exalts, into annuls. These are good when you're able to force very high quantity mobs into packs. We'll talk more about the specifics of these later when it comes to which embers and such that you're supposed to use. But for example, something like a rogue exile will always drop one of each piece of gear because they have a full set of gear equipped. So you can do things like that to force these modifiers to drop items. Next is the haunted modifiers. Now, I think the haunted modifiers are pretty poorly understood at this point. And as I said, these are the negative modifiers that make enemies more difficult. However, they also increase the amount of just Necropolis items that drop, meaning embers, meaning corpses. And as time goes on, with these new updated corpses, these are going to become more and more important because I do feel the new Necropolis crafting is really, really impactful. You can make some pretty crazy items. So you will want to take these modifiers, and if they are a very high tier, but say it's something like you get the highest tier of additional projectiles and you put it on a mob, like for example that we had in game, if you put like +6 projectiles on pale blackguards, you're probably going to be fine because they don't shoot projectiles. That could make it so that you get a bunch of corpses and a bunch of all flame embers, but you don't really need to worry about any negative effects from it. This is something where game knowledge is going to be more important, just knowing what the different types of packs can do and understanding what abilities they have. Notably, you can hold Alt and see what abilities some of these mobs can cast, so do be aware. It will kind of tell you, like, these mobs fire explosive arrows, so you definitely would not want to give them additional projectiles. These mobs cast fireballs, so you wouldn't want to give them additional projectiles. As long as you know what abilities are projectile based, you know where to put it. Some modifiers to look out for are going to be increased attack, cast, and movement speed. These can be pretty universally dangerous. There are a lot of mobs that are balanced in the sense that they are not very fast or they don't cast their ability very quickly. Things like discharge mobs. These with a ton of attack, cast, and movement speed could be insanely dangerous, so just be aware of that. Think of the mobs that when they get on top of you, it's really dangerous. Be careful about giving them this type of modifier. Next one's going to be non-damaging ailment reflection. Non-damaging ailment reflection can be pretty dangerous. Now, it's very rare in this giant list of modifiers here, but when you do see it, especially if you are a build that is shocking and chilling, you can get yourself killed very quickly. You can give yourself maximum chill and maximum shock, taking 50% more damage, having 30% action slowed, super easy. Even worse if you do alt ailments. Now, I already talked about this a little, but skills fire additional projectiles. Never, ever, ever put this on anything that fires projectiles. It is genuinely not worth it. Just put it on a melee mob and you'll be fine. And lastly, all damage can ignite, shock, freeze, poison, crit, etc., etc. Just be aware of these. If your build can't handle these certain kinds of mechanics, don't put it on a high density mob pack. Relatively straightforward, but I did want to at least mention it. Now let's talk a little bit about the Atlas tree. This is one of the first patches where we've gotten Atlas tree points for the new League mechanic on the League that it launches, which is kind of cool. However, a lot of these are a little bit confusing, especially if people don't understand the mechanic as a whole. So first, let's talk about some of those keystones. This first one is Fear of the Light. You can see that this makes it so that Haunted and Devoted modifiers are applied randomly to the packs in your maps. If you remember what I said previously in the last section about how some of these modifiers are really, really dangerous on certain mob types, this might make you think, well, why would you take this? Only reasonable time I think that you could take this is if you are, one, playing an extremely well-rounded build that is very good at surviving pretty much everything and can kill most anything without any issue, and two, you heavily dislike the League mechanic and interacting with it and you want nothing to do with it whatsoever. You just want to farm and blast your maps that you've been working with, and you don't care about anything having to do with this League mechanic. If both of those criteria are met, you could take this node, otherwise completely ignore it. It's really bad. Next is going to be Prospero's Wager. This node makes it so that all corpses with unresolved anguish in your maps have reveal a random craft when buried. This has to do with the crafting mechanic. If you give the corpses this, when you put the corpse in the ground to try to craft your item, it's going to have another random modifier on it. I overall think this is just universally bad. The problem here is that what if you put a corpse in the ground, it reveals a craft that bricks your item, and then you need to remove it and you've just lost it. The potential here is that if you do churn through a lot of corpses, when they reveal that random craft, it could be good. So you could fish for these random extra crafts that'll happen and make some giga overpowered tier item if you really wanted to, but you're gonna have to churn through a lot of corpses. So I, at a glance, don't think this is very good, except for people who are doing some really giga-mind big brain stuff, but that's going to come in the future. Right now, probably just don't take this. It's going to be more annoying than anything. First on the list of notables, we have Eternal Torment. This is going to make it so that Haunted pack leaders, meaning that if your pack has a leader, it's going to have a 50% increased chance to be rare. A 50% increased chance of what? I don't know. So most of the time when you have these kinds of modifiers, typically not too great. However, it does have the second line that says 50% chance to spawn a tormented spirit when you collect a corpse in your maps. If you are scaling tormented spirits with your strategy, this might be a little bit more interesting to you. Because every time that you collect one of those corpses, you're going to get an extra tormented spirit. Well, half of the time. And then the little nodes are just going to be chance for haunted monsters in your maps to drop Embers of the All Flame. These are pretty decent nodes, but it's not worth taking them just because. You would only really take them if you're going for Eternal Torment. Next on the list is going to be Royal Condensed and Decisive Souls. These are going to give you 100% increased chance, 25% increased chance, 100% increased chance to get unique items, modifier tier rating outcomes, and meta modifiers. This is one of those things where if these particular types of modifiers end up being worth more and you are farming a lot of corpses, you could take the individual ones that make sense, but this is a very watch the market and respond to it kind of thing. In my opinion, the increased modifier tier rating ones are going to be pretty good, and then potentially the meta modifier crafting ones are going to be okay depending on what people want. The corpses and maps have 100% increased chance to have unique item crafting outcomes. Most of the uniques that I've seen don't seem insanely good, but maybe the jewel with some particular mods on it could be okay. We'll see, but this is something that as people figure out builds and other stuff like that, we'll have to find out. As for the small notables here, they're just basically mini versions of the ones behind it and just a small increased chance for haunted monsters in your map. Nothing really too powerful. Next on the list is Devout Pursuit. This node right here makes us that the Lantern of Aramor has 30% increased chance for devoted modifiers. Devoted modifiers, as we talked before, are those positive modifiers. Having more of them is typically a good thing. There are quite a few of them that are worthwhile. You might as well go for this node. There's nothing bad about it, and it is pretty close to this modifier, Imperial Wraiths, which is quite good in my opinion. Haunted modifiers in the Lantern of Aramor are a tier higher. So the Imperial Race node, if your character is super strong and you're able to handle most of these modifiers without issue, so if we go in here to game and we take a look at these modifiers here, so for example, this one here says 192% increased chance to find corpses in all flame members. If we move it to this one that increases the modifier tier, it's now up to 240. So that's going to mean that all of those haunted modifier tiers are going to be one higher, which is going to give you more corpses, more all flame members, and just overall more loot, as long as your character can handle them. As for the small modifiers, you do want to go through the right side here, in my opinion, because this increases the effect of haunted modifiers in your map, which is good. These ones on the left are going to reduce the effect of haunted modifiers in your maps, which I think is bad. However, if you aren't taking this and you just want them to be weaker and you only care about devoted modifiers, sure, you can go this way, but I think the right side is definitely the way. Next on the list is going to be Geminate Haunting. This makes it so that haunted modifiers with unresolved anguish, that is when they drop the corpses, have a 25% chance to leave an additional corpse. If corpses are worthwhile and you're making a ton of money through corpses, this is just 25% more corpses. It's really powerful. It is quite a few points, so you're going to need to be in this area of the tree to get it, but a very powerful node if corpses are worth a lot. And last is going to be an Honest Job. This is just a power node that makes your character a little stronger. You might have seen a lot of people doing like Nico for the Pact with Energy node, which is very good. This one is not as good in my opinion. It makes it so that you have to consume corpses to get 10% of life and mana every second for 30 seconds. It's okay. If your build needs some more recovery or something like that, this is an okay node if you're already going towards Geminate Haunting, but otherwise I can't see you going out of your way to get this realistically, unless you're on like a very new character, or you want to put this in, say you're like early Atlas leveling tree. As for the small nodes, it's mostly increased chance for haunted monsters that have unresolved anguish. This is just good. This is just a bunch of chance for them to actually drop corpses, all pretty powerful. If corpses are worth a lot, these are all good small nodes. Next thing to talk about is which embers to use and when. So starting out, of course, we have frogs, we have rats. You're really going to mainly want to use these on the percent chance to drop divine, chaos, exalts, annuls, that kind of thing. This is because percentage chance, you're going to want the highest pack size, you're going to want to juice them like I said before, but this is mainly where you're going to be using these. It makes the most sense to use them there. You're juicing the amount of monsters in the pack so that you can hit that percentage chance more often. This is significantly more rare now, so just hold on to them. Next is going to be Meat Sacks and Rogue Exiles. So these are really going to be used for when you're getting conversion into divines, exalts, annuls, that kind of thing. Meat Sacks have very high quantity, and Rogue Exiles drop one of each piece of gear, so you can kind of force it. However, that the cost of these embers, it might be prohibitively cost to where it's only really worthwhile to use it for the divine node, because you might as well just sell the embers to other people instead of using it on anything else. And if these divine like drop modifiers are that rare, it might not be worth it at all. We're gonna have to see how commonly they pop up, but these are more rare. These meat sack and rogue exile ones are relatively rare, so we're gonna have to see. Next one's gonna be gemling pack leader. Now, this is one that's not super impactful, but it does say that Gemling Pack Leader drops an additional quality gem, and if you get the modifier that specifically says the strongest monster in pack gets increased quantity of items dropped, if you put these Gemling Leaders on there, you can get quite a few gems. I think I had one Gemling Leader drop 2 or 3 at once, and these can drop 2120 gems. If you get a very good 2120 gem from this, it'll probably sell for quite a bit. And then we get to the most common one here, which is going to be the vast majority of what you do, and that is just pack monsters can drop X. You'll see tainted currency, you'll see Order of the Chalice artifacts, you'll see things like omens, things like splinters, things like anything that causes it to drop X item. This is what you're going to use most of the time. This you're going to want to put on modifiers that have pack size. Quantity of items dropped, pack upgraded to magic or rare so that they drop a little bit more items. You're also going to want to use these whenever you do interact with the mechanic, and it gives you things like 50% increased pack size here, 50% more pack size here. If you get that modifier all the way up at the top and any kind of positive node that you can put on it, you probably want to toss one of your random tattoos or splinters or something on it, just because it's going to give you more loot than a random pack would. So that's when I feel that you should use most of the bulk of your embers. Just toss these on. You don't really need to think about it too much, besides whether or not the enemies are dangerous. One notable thing in here is that these omen mobs, if I can find them, pack monsters can drop omens. This gives you wildwood mobs. So be careful, because a lot of these mob types are directly from the league mechanic, and they have all of the defensive and offensive bonuses of the league mechanic. So if your character is not strong enough, you might run into some problems here, unfortunately. Like, there is one of the Trial of the Ancestors peak mobs from the tattoos that does this like giant AoE of chaos dots, and if your chaos resist is not good, that thing's gonna kill you instantly. So just be aware that some of these can be dangerous. You'll have to figure out which ones are more or less dangerous for your build. And lastly, let's talk about corpses. Now, when I recorded this video last night, the prices for these were significantly lower than they already were, and this is reinforcing the idea in my head that you should be collecting these corpses now, because they are going to skyrocket in price as people figure out how powerful this crafting is. However, and this is very time sensitive, you might not want to sell them for another 2 or 3 days. Most likely, the prices of these high-end corpses are going to skyrocket for at least a couple of days until people catch up and realize that they should be selling them, and then that's probably when you're going to want to sell. Don't wait too long, but if you have no direct need for currency at the moment, give it a couple of days and then sell, because most likely what I think is going to happen is they're going to go up and peak in a couple of days, and then they'll slowly just drop off over time as more and more supply is available. Now, keep in mind, this is a just complete gamble prediction, in my opinion. Worst case, if you don't want to gamble your currency, sell them immediately. It doesn't really matter. You're gonna make a ton of currency, you'll be happy, you'll get your items, you'll improve your character, you'll move on. But if the rationale that I've given you, the reasoning that I've given you makes sense, maybe wait a day or two. It's what I'm going to do. However, check the date that this video came out. If it's been 2 weeks since this video came out, don't listen to me right now. Don't listen to old ducks. Sell your stuff right away, because it's not really going to matter. Now, as for collecting these corpses, in my mind, the best way to do this is turn every single corpse into an itemized coffin and just toss it in a dump tab. The reason for this is that interacting with the corpses and the coffins in your mausoleum, or whatever you want to call it, is really frustrating and really annoying. And this, when you press that little corner button in a map, it just automatically tosses it in your inventory, and then you can put it in a dump tab, and there's not really anything to worry about. Just do it for every corpse that you find. Don't think about it. Toss it in the dump tab, and then later on you can search for, you know, like certain kinds of corpses, or if you want some of these like effect corpses or duplicate corpses or whatever you're looking for, you can just find them in the dump tab, move them into a priced tab like one of these over here, and go from there. And lastly, of course, as I said, keep an eye on the PoE Ninja prices, because a lot of these might be a surprising amount of money because some big brain person has figured out some crazy crafting mechanic that they can use for this, and the price of an item may be worth more than what you're expecting. And that is going to be it for the video. Hopefully I've enlightened you a little bit as to how the league mechanic works, what you should be doing, and how to just simply interact with it and not have to worry too much about doing any big crazy churning strategies or anything like that, or doing any crafting that's maybe a little bit above what you're capable of doing. These are just some basic guidelines on what to do to make the most money out of this league mechanic without having to think too much. So remember, boys, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to give this video a like, subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit that notification bell to stay up to date with all the latest videos, and stay safe out there in raid class. And I'll see you guys in the next video.